Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachit, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Maryland. Today, I'll be presenting my work titled Modeling the Interviewer Leveraging LLMs to Uncover Personality Mismatch Effects in Interview Assessment. This is a joint work with Professors Balaji and Shiva at the University of Maryland. To motivate this study, I'd like to start off with a natural experiment that occurred in the 1970s at the University of Texas Medical School. The university had a policy of conducting interviews before taking students into their cohort, which was roughly around 150 students. However, in 1979, state law mandated the school to intake an additional 50 students who were initially rejected based on the interview performance. When researchers compared the academic performance of the two groups, students who were in, accepted into the program and students who were initially rejected from the program because of the interview assessment, they did not find any significant differences between the academic performance. In other words, the interview, which was meant to filter out the better candidates, wasn't able to do so, highlighting a severe inefficiency in the interviews as a selection tool. This inefficiency within interviews is not unique to the school admission process. Practitioners and researchers have questioned the effectiveness of interviews in hiring broadly as well. Some people have even called interviews as compared them to as flipping a coin. Recent studies have analyzed detailed transcripts into job interviews and have found that job interviews fail to assess particular skills for which they are meant to, for which they are designed to measure. This brings us to the key component of this study, which is, can large language models be used to simulate the job interview process and understand the interview process in a much more detailed manner? To better situate this study, I'd like to go through the hiring pipeline. The process begins with candidate sourcing, where companies and platforms match candidates to relevant job opportunities. Next is the resume screening process, where companies filter candidates based on their resumes. There's a lot of automation which happens at this step. There are increasingly AI algorithms which filter candidates. And researchers also found gender bias in this stage. And there are several algorithms which have alleviated this problem by designing algorithms to improve diversity as well as quality. Next in the pipeline is interviews. As compared to other processes within the pipeline, there is limited research on this topic. Researchers have largely looked at how interview structure affects the outcomes. And finally is the candidate assessment. There is a rich body of literature studying candidate assessments. Most notably, Golden and Roos find gender bias in candidate evaluations. Burton and Mulyanathan, they find a racial bias in candidate assessments. And lastly, Sears and Rowe find a personality-based bias in candidate assessment. To better structure this study, I'd like to explain the research context. Interviews is a broad term. Companies use multiple rounds of interviews. However, the behavioral round is by far the most common. Around 70 to 90% of companies use the behavioral interview. In the behavioral interview, candidates are asked questions based on situational questions to display their past experiences and are meant to assess softer skills like leadership, team working, and conflict resolution. The main aim of the behavioral interview is to assess candidates' personality. Increasingly, firms are also deploying AI algorithms which assess personality from interview transcripts. There is a lot of work in this space as well. Researchers, more specifically computer science researchers, they have developed algorithms to infer personality better. Researchers have looked at how effective or valid are AI assessments in personality. as well as candidate preferences when they are evaluated by an AI. However, there is one key aspect which has been unexplored: the role of interviewer's personality in these interviews. We fill this gap by designing LLM interviewers, and for the first time, we specifically infuse personality into the LLM interviewers and assess whether a match or mismatch between the interviewer and the interviewee affects behavioral interview assessments. To answer the specific research questions, we design a randomized experiment with graduate students in the university. The students enrolled in the study first begin by completing the 44-item Big Five personality inventory. This forms the ground truth measure of a candidate's personality. Next, the students are asked to take a behavioral interview with an LLM interviewer. This lasts for around 15 minutes. Most importantly, the students are randomized to a LLM interviewer with a matched personality or a LLM interviewer with a mismatched personality. At the end, the students complete a follow-up survey eliciting their reactions. This design helps us to separate out the causal impact of interviewee mismatch on assessments. The key aspect of this study is infusing personality into the LLM. We begin by operationalizing the baseline, the LLM, which is GPT-4o, which we used here, and we prompted the LLM to complete the Big Five inventory. As expected, we found that the LLM displayed personality which was high on openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness. However, it was low on neuroticism. Next, we systematically infuse personality into the LLM interviewer. We leverage the lexical hypothesis in personality and design prompts based on adjectives and descriptive text. These prompts are then fed to the LLM, and for each of the Big Five personality traits, we systematically vary it at 4 levels: extremely low, moderately high, and extremely high. The LLM is then prompted again and reassessed using the Big Five personality inventory. The results are as follows. Our prompting strategy works really well, and we are able to infuse specific personality at specific level into the LLM. This can be seen here. This is numerical evaluations. The LLM are perfectly linearly correlated with what we intended and what the LLM displayed. We use the extreme versions of the personality for each trait for our experiment. The interview is structured in a semi-structured format and is conducted completely using voice interactions. To ensure that the sessions are manageable, we cap the interviews at 750 words. And both the interviewer and interviewee transcripts are displayed on the screen. Additionally, to ensure that the interviews are meaningfully assessing personality, we designed further prompts, asking the LLM to conduct interviews in an effective manner, display personality traits at each turn, and ask follow-up questions to the candidate, as well as triangulating candidate claims by asking follow-up questions. This ensures that the interview are as realistic as possible. So we have essentially simulated an interview and infused personality. The key outcome variable is the predictive accuracy of the personality of the candidate. We operationalize this by measuring the ground truth personality from the inventory. This is on a scale of 50, and we binarize them using past values obtained by large-scale studies. So we have the ground truth in a binary format. Next, we extract the interviewee transcripts and feed them to multiple LLMs to infer the binary personality of the particular candidate. This forms our accuracy measure. We compare the inferred personality from the LLM and the ground truth personality from the inventory. And we compare them across the 2 treatment groups using a simple regression model. The results are shown here. Currently, we have conducted the experiment for 3 of the 5 Big Five personality traits. Openness, which is associated with creativity and willingness to learn new things. We find that when there is a match between the interviewer and interviewee on openness, the accuracy is as high as 80%, while when there is a mismatch, it reduces sharply to 40%. Next, extroversion, which is associated with sociable and talkativeness, often important for industries like sales and management. Again, when there is a match in personality, the accuracy is very high as opposed to mismatch. Lastly, for neuroticism, which is associated with stress and anxiety and a negative predictor of workplace performance, again, a match leads to a high predictive accuracy even on this negative trait, and a mismatch leads to a low accuracy rates. Overall, a match between the interviewer and interviewee on a specific personality trait leads to better accuracy. To better understand these findings, I'd like to briefly go over the conceptual framework underpinning this study. We ground the study in the realistic accuracy model, which is a well-known framework for explaining personality predictions in interviews. The framework posits that big five traits are valid and they affect both job performance and interview performance. They can be measured using methods such as these inventories, and they are observable in various settings such as job interviews. The prediction works as follows. The candidate has a particular personality and that drives the candidate's performance in the interview, and the candidate displays their personality, which is inferred by the observer, which could be an algorithm or a human. And the inferred personality is then compared to the ground truth measure to obtain the assessment accuracy. A key aspect in this framework is the a concept of trait availability, which refers to how how extent the trait is displayed for it to be inferred by an interviewer. We hypothesize and we expand this framework by including the interviewer's personality, and we hypothesize that the interviewer's personality alters the trait availability through the mirror neuron mechanism. These are neurons in the brains which fire when someone acts or sees someone else acting. So when an interviewee displays their personality, the interviewee also starts mirroring the personality of the interviewer, thereby altering their own trait availability and the underlying ground truth personality, which is why when there is a mismatch, there is a misprediction of the candidate's personality. Here are some transcripts from our experiments. Here is an LLM interviewer which was prompted to be introverted. It displays those texts, and starkly we see that the interviewee, who is of a mismatched personality, is extroverted but starts displaying introverted personality here. So we also, this is for the trait neuroticism. The LLM is neurotic and the interviewee is non-neurotic. Even for this trait, which is often considered negative, the interviewee starts mirroring the same personality. Beyond these textual snippets, we also conducted structured textual analysis. We extracted the interviewee's transcript and then extracted thematic clusters using LDA, extracted adjectives, nouns, and verbs from those transcripts and fed them through a sentiment classifier to obtain positive sentiment scores in the interview transcripts. And we compared them across these different treatment groups. What we observe is that openness, which is associated with high positivity scores. So when a highly open candidate is interviewed with a highly open interviewer, there is overall high positivity in the interview. And when there is a mismatch, that positivity reduces significantly. Across different traits, we observe the same findings. Extroversion, again associated with high amount of positivity. So when an extroverted interviewee is matched with an extroverted interviewer, there's overall high positivity. And when it's matched to an introverted interviewer, that dips. Similarly, for neuroticism, it's associated with low positive sentiment. When there is a match, there's low positive sentiment in the interview. But when the neurotic candidate is matched with a non-neurotic one, the positive sentiment increases. The key takeaway is that we're essentially we are picking up these mirroring mechanisms through these sentiment analysis. And it's consistently when there is a match, uh, we observe high positive sentiment scores, and when there is a mismatch, this mirroring occurs and the sentiment changes. This is again validating our hypothesis that this mirroring is happening. In summary, it is well acknowledged that interviews have a problem in as a selection tool. However, research is very limited in this area, primarily because of two reasons: limited observability of the interview process and lack of availability of interviewers. We develop a novel framework by designing an LLM and systematically infusing personality into the LLM and assessing whether a match or mismatch in personality between the interviewer and interviewee affects behavior interview outcomes. What we find is that when there is a match, it leads to better prediction of the specific trait. We analyze the textual transcripts and find evidence for a mirroring mechanism. Overall, if firms do not account for these mismatches between the interviewer and interviewee, it could lead to misaligned hiring, thereby affecting company performance and employee turnovers. Thank you.